Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
They say for every light in this world, there is a shadow waiting to reclaim it. We've been told what to believe, what to fear, and exactly where the boundaries of real end. But tonight, we're crossing those lines. From the whispers in the attic to the lights in the desert sky, and the entities that walk among us, we are stepping behind the veil. Transmitting from deep within the mountains of West Virginia, it's time to seek the truth. This is Let's Find Out with Diego. And now, here is your host, Diego the Podcaster.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest has always been a storyteller of sorts. He's an Air Force veteran, ordained minister, retired nurse, author of faith-based Western books and award-winning ghost stories. With 24 works of fiction that border on the edge of history and the supernatural, available for all to read. Hear me now, believe me later. He's just getting started. All this plus more. Please welcome our new friend and first-time guest, author Jack LaFountain. Jack, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to sharing some stories with you.
That'd be great. I mean, as we were talking on the pre-interview, I was going through your website and everything in here. I want to talk about everything. Everything looks good.
Okay.
And actually, I have to thank our good friend, author, also Justin Grammer, for making the connection. And now I have you on the show. Justin's a heck of an author, and he said you got to have Jack on. He's got some great stuff to talk about. So here we are, my friend.
Oh yeah, I saw Dustin not too long ago. We were at a book fair together, and we hadn't really met, but our booths were side by side. And while I was unloading, my partner in the company, she said, "Hey, Dustin here's got your book." I said, "Really?" Yeah, we had a mutual friend, and yeah, it was good to meet him. And he's a great guy, great author.
Yeah, I bug in about every other day. We're talking bouncing ideas back and forth. He's always writing stories. I'm always booking the guests and telling him, hey, what we're up to is one of those things also, not only with authors and podcasters, but everybody has his own individual cheerleader towards each other. We all want to do well. We all want to get creative. We all want to write our books. And no, perfect. This is perfect for the subject of tonight. And I'm looking at your bio. I mean, you've had many careers. I don't even know where to begin because I know Air Force, ordained minister, and retired nurse. Now, during all those years, you were active in those careers, and I know you're still active Air Force. Did you have any inclination or any envision yourself becoming an author? Were you doing any writing at that time?
No, absolutely not until about the last 2 years of my working career as a nurse. I started out, like I said, in the Air Force. I was Vietnam era. I wasn't actually in Vietnam, but I was in Southeast Asia at the time. Got out of the service, become an ordained minister, and still do that. And a hospice chaplain, and I still do that part time. In fact, I'll be ministering Sunday in a church here in Huntsville. Uh, but it doesn't pay as well as people think doing that job. So and because I was a hospice chaplain, I watched the nurses that were working with the people that we took care of, and I thought I'd like to do that too. And so I went to nursing school, became a nurse, and worked as a nurse for about 25 years. And strangely enough, never once got to do hospice work.
And nursing, that's hard work, man. I've been to the hospital several times and doctors' offices. They're some of the busiest people in the whole area.
Oh yeah, yeah. I worked most of the time. I did a lot of travel nursing, so I traveled around the country doing it 13 weeks at a time, and most of my time was spent in the ER, and I enjoyed that. It was a good time, and uh, people ask me sometimes, "Do I miss it?" And that, not really. I kind of got sidelined. I had to have back surgery, and that just I couldn't go the 12-hour shifts anymore after that. So I retired from that. When I retired from that, I started writing full time, and so I've done about 23 books since then.
Well, let me ask you this, not to get too personal. How long ago did you retire?
I retired in 2019. So
Okay,
I've
so
been a bit busy.
I'm looking at my no, yeah, I'm looking at my calendar to my lower right, and I'm doing the math. 24 is 2026. I mean, that is an amazing amount of work. What I would say, consider a short amount of time to have that many books out. So, what was your first book that you wrote?
The very first book I did actually has another title now. Right now, it's called "Death Rides the Red River." That wasn't the original title. I self-published it um, in a couple years before I tried. I remember exactly right now which year that was, but I self-published that. It really didn't do anything, and then I joined up with a another publishing company, and they wanted to redo it, redo the cover, redo the name, and republish it. So yeah, I went with that after Um, so then there was a name change. Really, the content didn't change any at all.
And during that time, were you? Because I know you write westerns, and I would imagine that subject can get kind of tricky because it's in a way kind of a short period of time.
Yes.
There's so much material to cover, and I tell you, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, and I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to get in any kind of trouble. One of the main things he covers is, yeah, they cover stuff like Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid,
Right.
and of course, you get into the feuds between families back in the day and things like that. But they cover a lot of things about like lesser known outlaws and stories like that.
Right.
So, what part of Western history did struck you the most? What was more interesting for you?
Well, what kicked me off with that book, that the Death Rides the Red River is a western. I did a short story before I did the book. Just it really never went anywhere. Just did it for myself. But the idea behind the story was during the war between the states, both sides uh, employed werewolves as terror weapons, and this story is based on the idea that each side had their werewolves, but when the Confederacy collapsed in the retreat from Richmond, that all these werewolves were basically got away, and now that the war is over. Um, People in Congress they want to make sure that basically the public doesn't find out that they're out there and cause a panic. So they employ a couple of the fellows that were sort of their keepers during the war to hunt them down, and that's that's what that book is about. My editor that I have now calls it Men in Black before there were Men in Black, because their job was to hunt these werewolves down and get rid of them and make sure nobody knew what was really going on.
So right off the bat, you just throw a little bit of spice in there with werewolves in a western. Now, were you always interested in that subject? Because I mean, everybody has a favorite um, type of movie for werewolves. Mine is, Silver Bullet and then American Werewolf in London. Is there anything that kind of inspired you to write about werewolves?
Um, Not other than that. From a very young age, I was very into the Universal Studios monsters, and the Wolfman was my favorite. The two you mentioned were again are a couple of my favorite movies. So Silver Bullet and American Werewolf in London. Uh, I really like both of those and watched them. I don't know how many times, but a lot. And so yeah, and people I tell them I love my werewolves. They're in that Western series of stories, and then the biggest series of stories that I got started with Bayou Moon. Basically, is the Cajun's werewolf, which is called the Rougarou, and that runs throughout. We're now. I just put out the 8th book in that series, and yeah, the Rougarou runs all through that. So it is
And
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No.
cut you off. When it comes to doing the research in these subjects, where do you go to? I mean, are you looking at websites more of a paranormal angle? Are you looking at the history or the folklore in your area or other states?
Uh, kind of both. I mean, I look at sort of some of the modern works and theatrical works, but for the Rougarou especially, I did a lot of research on the Cajun lore, but also in kind of predating their being in Louisiana. I know that I speak just a tiny bit of French, and a lot of the French people tell me no, it's not Rougarou, it's Loup-garou, and yes, it is. If you want to talk about werewolves, but the term the Cajuns use that came from when they were in Canada before they were displaced to New Orleans, and it was a mixture of French and Native American. Uh, and so that's where the term came from. But I did a lot of research on some of the tales, both from early France before the big migration, and also like I said, the Canadians in Eastern Canada and Native Americans that were there.
And there's so much to really cover because each talk about Native Americans, you're talking about French, you're talking about you probably Germany. There's so much to pick from there. You managed to put it all in a, I would say, very original look at werewolves and Rougarous, which leads me to the next question. Not really werewolf related because I'm going down again on your website. It's
Yeah,
one of the books I was going to talk to you about here because this show loves the subject of Sasquatch or Bigfoot or
right.
Yeti. I'm looking at the cover of Tracks, and then the question begs this: why Bigfoot? The different types of themes that you write about. This one sticks out to me. Is have you always been interested in Bigfoot? Were you an active watcher, like in of the Gimlin film, and documentaries about Bigfoot?
I was, and I grew up actually in Northern California in the Sierras, um, not really very far from where the Gimlin film was actually done. And in the summer before I went into the service, I happened to be even closer to that area, and there's a sort of a tourist site there, but they had a huge gift shop, and they had footprints, they had uh, pictures, stills from the Gimlin film. They had books, some of the early books on Sasquatch, and I got interested in it then. And then after I retired, I moved to well, I was in Washington State when I retired, and I moved to Idaho after that. And just a lot of the stories that I picked up in Tracks. I do write. I write fiction, and I tell people there's 4 stories in Tracks, and they're fictionalized, but they are based on stories that people told me about encounters that they had had, about things that they had seen or experienced. And again, the idea of the first story in that book uh, it relies heavily on Native American myths from the Olympic Peninsula, and I gathered some of the myths from there and the stories and things that the Native Americans reported in the area, and I mixed that with reports that I got from people who lived there. I actually lived right at the base of the Olympic Peninsula in Shelton, Washington, which is part of where that story takes place, and so I was familiar with that area, and have actually been out on a few hunts for Bigfoot in while I lived there. So
No, that's awesome. It's very interesting. It kind of helps you, I guess, set the stage for the book. And from all those stories that you heard and you read about, is there a particular one that stands out to you the most? Is there one that's more disturbing than the other?
I don't know about serving. The one that took me most by surprise when I was researching for the book, I wanted to talk about Bigfoot who was encounters that took place in areas that I was familiar with, and I was looking for the fall story. and I was looking through BFRO reports, and I stumbled across one that took place in Sulphur, Oklahoma, which I lived there for quite a number of years, and I had never heard anything about it. And just the where the sighting took place just amazed me, because it's basically with inside of town. The street lights of some of the city are maybe a few hundred yards away from where this sighting took place, and that was intriguing. So I had to do a take on that story, and it was fun to do that. The one I think people talk to me the most about is the winter story that I did in there, and the cover has that winter scene on there that had a fellow that he does that's actually a painting from a fellow by the name of Michael Payton. He does a lot of Bigfoot paintings, and I happened to run across that, and I said, I'd like you to paint me one for a cover of a book. And he said, well, he would do that. And by the way, he said, I've got a story that I would like to have somebody edit for me. So I said, there we go. We got a trade. You paint me the cover of my book and I'll edit your story for you. And that's the way that came off. But anyways, that winter story, I wrote from Bigfoot's point of view. Bigfoot's telling the story of how he makes it through the winter. And that was a big challenge. I went out to when I was researching for it, went out to the Bigfoot community and asked them the question, tell me how you know that Bigfoot thinks. So, so I can write this story in Bigfoot's thinking. Tell me how you know that Bigfoot thinks. And I had a lot of different answers, and none of them really convinced me. One fellow told me, well, you can see the intelligence in their eyes. I've never been that close, so I don't know but I did finally run across stories, and one of them was that there were these Bigfoot that they lived in the area where there was a house, and this house had motion sensor lights on the outside. And they actually figured out how close they could get before the lights came on, and put sticks out on the ground to mark the place where you could go. Basically, you could go this far, and if you went any further, you're going to turn the lights on. And so that told me they think. I got another story from a fellow who goes way out in the wilderness along the Oregon-Washington border, the Blue Mountains out there, way beyond where people normally go. And actually, he heard interaction between a couple of Sasquatches and he speaks about 7 different languages, from anywhere from, I think he does some Chinese and then European languages as well. He said you could tell by the sort of the cadence of the talk that this was language, but it wasn't any language that I'd ever heard. And I said, well, that convinces me. So I'm going to do the story. And then I thought, okay, I'm all set. I can do this story now. I can write the story. And I sat down to write it, and I said, well, wait a minute. Okay, Bigfoot thinks, and he's, basically, if he thinks like we do, think in words. And so what does Bigfoot call things? What does he call a human being? What does he call a cow? What does he call a house? And I thought, well, I'm not Tolkien. I'm not going to come up with a whole Bigfoot dictionary. I'm not that ambitious, but we kind of use some terms sort of from not really children's terms, but sort of more descriptive kind of terms. Actually, I guess I can give this away, but he actually in the story he calls people hay. They're hay, and he gets it from hearing people talk and say hey, to each other, and so okay, they're the hay, and that's what he calls them. And finally got through the story. Actually, I did publish a little article called "Becoming Bigfoot" uh, about that. Uh, Sort of, it had more to do with writing than Bigfoot, in that if you want to tell a fictional story, um, the way to do it is to tell as much truth as you can, and then kind of slide the fictional part into that where it doesn't really show up. Uh, I was actually watching a movie earlier today, and it's like the author, whoever wrote the story or the screenplay, didn't take into account why people do things. They had the characters in the story doing things because that's what they wanted done, and there's no really logic to, well, why are they doing that? And I wanted that to come through in the Bigfoot story. Why does Bigfoot do this? Why does he do that? And I think a lot of it comes through. A lot of people are entertained by the story, anyways, and that's my big point. That's why I did fictionalized stories rather than a series of true stories. I like the true stories. I like people to tell me the stories, but I said, if I sit down to write that the way people tell me, it's going to sound like court testimony. And I understand that in court testimony, you're telling the truth and you want to be believed. I get that, but it's not very exciting. It doesn't always develop into a story, and I wanted these to develop into a story that not only had the encounter and some of the feelings that go along with it, but then tell a story too. Tell what happened to the people, how it affected them, and what became of their life afterwards.
And that's very interesting because sometimes when you write these stories, you have to change them a little bit to be, or say, more entertaining and digestible for people. Like you're talking about, it comes off like courtroom testimonies, and for some people, be maybe not as entertaining to follow as if you dress it up and make it a little more, I guess, easier to read. So let
I
me,
think so. Yeah.
let me ask you this: with all those eyewitness testimonies and the research that you did, and I don't think there's a wrong answer to this, regardless of what some people may think. What is your opinion on Bigfoot? And I know that you might be taking it from a different kind of angle. You've actually gone out there and gone squatching for a few times, but in your opinion, what do you think we're looking at?
I think probably the first thought I have of it, and I'm open to some others thinking on it, but the Native American lore that I have in tracks in that first story that comes from the Salish Indians up in the Olympic Peninsula area and down to Oregon. Uh, their thought is that Sasquatch is a part of basically the original creation. Their creator character created Bigfoot was created along with everything else, and basically their thought on Bigfoot is that he didn't take up what they call the soul power. So he wasn't quite human, but a little more than uh, maybe some of the other creatures that closer to human, but maybe not quite there. In that he didn't take up the soul power. One of their thoughts is that he can understand all the native languages from the Olympic Peninsula. He migrates up and down the peninsula like the natives did. Even intruded onto their villages at times. They A lot of them thought Bigfoot was kind of at times sort of a trickster, that he would play tricks on them. They also had stories occasionally of him carrying women away, which is what the story in the book tracks is kind of takes off on. So and I kind of lean towards that. I know I hear people talk about them maybe being interdimensional, and that's a possibility. I think a very real possibility. Uh, from my ministerial background, there are creatures that are sort of interdimensional, or maybe some people call them spiritual creatures, but they move between another realm and Earth, and that happens in the scripture. So so I think that could be a real possibility as well.
Now, in your area, we won't say what state you're living in, and I know that you take stories from people that in your area because I think it's easier to follow instead of trying to do something and research it. And if it was like a Bigfoot in Iceland or Greenland, you know more about the area here in the states than you would uh, another country. Have there been any? Is your state known for Bigfoot, and has there been any stories recently that you know
Uh,
of?
I haven't really found any recent ones. Again, the one of the stories in Tracks is comes from a BFRO report that took place in the area where I live now. Um, it's not there. They do have something that they call the white thing around where I live. That is basically a white Bigfoot. This one is not about the white thing, but there was an encounter not too far from where I live right now, and I actually went down to that area after I came across this report. There's a business that's right there, and I thought, well, I'm going to go down there and talk to the people that run this business and find out, were they involved? Did they know anything? And I went and visited with them, and the fellow that owns it said, well, I don't really believe in Bigfoot, or I know, but he said those folks that came out here, they had all this expensive equipment. They came out and they set up all over the place. I said those fellows were really serious. Uh,
Yeah.
and they were doing some serious research, and he said, he kind of said, if they're willing to be that involved in research, maybe there's something to it. And I don't know about whether he, his personal beliefs, but I know on the trucks that they have at this business, they have a couple of pickup trucks, and the tailgates on both trucks have uh, very great images of Sasquatch on it. So yeah, it's and so I wrote that story to kind of do something close to home with that, and uh, that was fun as well.
And now that we have the Bigfoot, now in your universe of writing, are you? Does any other cryptid come to mind right now or on your radar to possibly cover in the future?
Well, actually, the book I just put out, it's called Latish Moon. It takes place in Louisiana, and the Latish. I came across the Latish, which is part of Cajun folklore. It's not clear from what research I've done on that if this is an actual just physical being, or maybe it's kind of a spiritual being. The sort of the legend begins with that. Um, Again, it's very very Catholic area. So the unbaptized child that is left out in the swamp, basically on their own, and is taken in by the alligators, and becomes spiritually, and some say physically as well, part human, part alligator. And it's sort of like the Rougarou stories. It loves to turn people in their pirogues over and in the bayou and kill them. And the story that I did kind of mixes that with some voodoo characters. That the one character that is sort of over the migration between our dimension and the spiritual world, that has to, sort of the gatekeeper, and people call upon this gatekeeper to let this spiritual creature cross over and wreak havoc on the bayou area there.
And that's one of the cool things about you, Jack, that you're not afraid to cover different type of topics because you do westerns, you do supernatural, you got cryptids, and then I'm looking at something that really caught my eye. And it's never too early to talk about this because I know we are in May, and really Christmas is not too far away.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking at Krampus. Now I'm gonna do my best German here. Krampusnacht. Did I
Krampusnacht.
get?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Thank goodness I got that right. And it's one of those topics that's been gaining a lot of popularity lately with Krampus. There was a movie, I think it was about 10 years ago. Within 10 years, Krampus. I don't know if you've seen it. Very well done, very entertaining. But
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've seen that.
with
Uh,
Krampus now, what got you interested in Krampus?
well, actually, how I got started in that one, early on when I first started writing, I did a lot of short stories, and I wrote a couple of short stories. There was a group over in North Ireland. They did an international Christmas ghost story competition, and I joined that the 2 years. They only had it for 2 years. The 2 years that they had it, um, and I placed third the first year and second the next year. So I was doing Christmas and I just decided I'm gonna. I liked it so much. I thought I'm going to do a Christmas ghost story every year. And so then I found I was doing it more than every year, doing all these Christmas ghost stories. And so the idea came together. Well, I'm going to put all of these stories together in a book. And since that's like you said, Krampus was gaining popularity, and my hero Ed Landry from the Moon books, I thought it would be a great idea to have him have an encounter with Krampus for a
Okay,
story. So
was he
that's yeah. So
was
we
he
would do
bad?
that.
They throw him in the sack and take
Yeah.
him to the coal mines?
He did come off all right with Krampus, and I also on that there's also a cryptid story in there. There's one about Bigfoot. Uh, that again I took from the news. The idea for it came from the news, where this fella had found a box in a sort of a landfill type dump, and he he heard this box was making noise and shaking around, and he picked the box up and he looked inside, and there was a dog and six puppies in there, and the sort of the story kind of caught on about this dog and her puppies, uh, and I'd heard also another story about Krampus kind of helping people and sort of helpless beings out. And in this story, this fella finds these puppies, but he uh, he has an accident and loses them, and uh, Bigfoot picks them up and drops them off on his door. The whole box full of the dog and the puppies, drops them off on his doorstep and leaves them there, but still hangs around for a while. So he has some encounters with. He's actually out in the woods, and it's set in Northern California around the place where the Gimlin film was done, and he has some encounters with Bigfoot there, uh, and again, it was just a fun idea for Christmas, something different for Christmas to tell.
Right, because there's so many, like, especially if you, I don't know if you watch Hallmark Channel or Lifetime Channel, but sometimes they have the very same romantic Christmases. It's the same
Right,
Christmas stories.
right.
We need more Krampus and Bigfoot stories out there,
Yeah,
especially
I,
during the
I,
holiday season.
I think so. And that's kind of my weird thing on Christmas. One of the other stories in the book is that a fellow goes to one of these Christmas pop up markets, Christmas bazaar, and he buys a wallet, and it turns out the wallet is haunted, and the ghost that's attached to this wallet follows him home. So, yeah, like I said, I like the Christmas ghost, and that's a tradition that used to be, and not so much anymore. And that's where the Christmas Carol came from. That was tradition in that time in England, that you told ghost stories around the fire in the wintertime and around Christmas time.
That's kind of a tradition that I wish we could keep continue going because I know Christmas is Christmas, but sometimes you want to mix it up a little bit. And I know times are changing, and maybe traditions will also come from the past will come to the future again in present time. Now, I know that we're talking about 24 books, and I know you always got something always cooking. And without giving it too much away, what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm working on. You notice I've got 3 books that have Deadwood in the title right now. Uh, for the past, this will be the 4th June. I'm going to Deadwood, South Dakota. There's a writers' meeting there. It's called Wild Deadwood Reads, and it's just been it's not required. It's just a project of mine that I like to do. Is that every year before I go, I write a collection of short stories. And so I'm working on that right now. I've got um, basically to write the end of one last story, and that one will be done. And I can turn it over to the editor and let them take off with it. But I've kind of done that. I kind of sort of, although I don't always admit it, snuck myself into that book. Well, all of those books. Um, in Dead Man's Hand, the last story is about this unnamed writer who happens to be in Deadwood for a book fair, and he has a heart attack, and while hovering between life and death, finds himself in a poker game with the other characters in the story and Hickok, and that's kind of I kind of took off with that. Last year's Return to Deadwood, those are all actually the stories in there are all actual reported stories from uh, strange happenings and folklore from South Dakota. Um, there's a Bigfoot story in there. There's a that takes place at a place called the Devil's Bathtub. There's a story in there about a ghost that visits this certain bar in Rapid City. There's a story in there about the ghost of Seth Bullock, who was a sheriff in Deadwood, and there's even one about how the Devil's Canyon got its name. So I kind of picked up stories from around there. They're all fictionalized. That's another cryptid creature I ran across while doing that is something called the mini washoe, which is this creature that lives in the Missouri River and is sort of responsible for breaking up the ice. And the legend is that if you see this creature and sort of look it in the eye, you will go crazy. And I've included that one in the story. The only one, there's one story in there that I didn't fictionalize much, and it's the story of the oldest unsolved murder in South Dakota. So yeah, kind of just told a lot of different things about the area, and it was a nice thing I think to do. It went over pretty well. The if you've ever been to South Dakota, you know about Wall Drug Store. And from the time you come into the state, you got signs telling you how far it is to Wall Drug. Uh, then Wall Drug actually bought the book and carries it in their bookstores.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the bumper stickers every time I go out of town or on the highways. And well, now I'm on the hook now with the stories you're about to write. Now, for our friends and listeners of Let's Find Out, they will also be on the hook, but they want to learn more about you, your books, and where to get them. Where can they find out?
Um, all the books are available at through houseofhonorbooks.com. We have them. Most all of them are on Audible. They're on Kindle. There's a Kindle version, and then we have all of our books that the publishing company does are available on Kindle Unlimited, which you pay a subscription for that, and you can check out the books like from a library. It doesn't cost you anything. and we like it, and we kind of encourage people who have it to take a look at us, because it's a great way to find new authors without spending a lot of money on it, and so people are attracted to that and do that, and then they're all in paperback as well. But yeah, you can get their links on there. You can go on and listen to a sample of the audiobooks on the website too.
Excellent. I'll have the links to House of Honor books and Jack LaFountain, author.com on the show description. And when book number 25, 26, and 27 come out, and I know it'll be sometime this year, I'd love to invite you to come back and let's talk about those stories.
Oh, sure.
And
That'd be great.
let's see what else you conjure up, my friend.
All right, we'll do.
Thank you, my friend.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.